I'm Joe Nelson. I'm a senior attorney with Atlanta Legal Aid, the Cobb County office.
My name's Kate Gaffney. I'm also a senior attorney with Atlanta Legal Aid.
Challenges are many for our clients and for survivors. We know, right, it takes on average individuals 7 times to finally leave an abusive relationship, and the time of departure is by far the most dangerous. Well, especially our clients with legal aid, they have limited financial means. And so their significant other that may be the abuser is the breadwinner. They have limited childcare options. They may also just plain, they love their partner. And it's just a complicated cycle to extricate themselves from. And it very much is a process. Domestic violence rate has more to do with the power and control. And what we see often, and when we talk to survivors, is they will say that the emotional abuse was worse than the physical, right? The emotional abuse is daily, and then the bruises will heal. And when you are belittled and degraded on a regular basis, you start to believe what you're being told. And so you're in this kind of psychological trap, especially in reference again to what Kate would have mentioned, if this is something that's a secret and there's shame associated with it, which is obviously frequently the case. Our clients are kind of living in this psychological prison. And when you go out and seek help as a survivor, you really need to be kind of inundated with all of the resources available to you at one time because of all of these kind of difficult components that are keeping you in the relationship. And so having an advocacy center where clients can go and talk to law enforcement if they want to, or not, talk to a legal aid attorney about divorce and child support and custody options, talk to Live Safe about getting a protective order, receive counseling, in-house, all of that in one place really is going to provide the client with support that they need to depart from this situation. Not to mention, by collaborating, you're filling in a lot of gaps. So there, for instance, are clients that law enforcement may be working with that would benefit from a TPO, but we don't know about that because we're not in the same room. There is no substitute for in-house working together in collaboration. And that's what's going to be accomplished through the Family Advocacy Center. Our relationships as service providers are only going to strengthen, and that will provide kind of the network and net essentially of support that we can use to kind of push or provide our survivors, our clients, with the services they need to depart.
They'll show up and they will be greeted by an administrative professional at the front who will just get some very basic information of what brought them there for assistance today. They'll then meet with one of the 2 navigators that we already have working over there. So that's wonderful. They're getting ready to serve the first clients. And so they will have that more in-depth discussion with a client about what their current needs are, and in a safe and comfortable environment. It's going to be welcoming and inviting. There'll be an area for children if the applicant came for assistance and has kids, and they'll be given information on all the service providers and then the opportunity to meet with them. So if the navigators are meeting with them, it sounds like they want more information on a protective order. In many states it's restraining order. Then they would be given the opportunity to meet with a legal aid lawyer or a legal aid paralegal under the supervision of a lawyer. So to have that legal advice at the outset is really invaluable. So then they're getting this information up front about, well, if I file that, this is what happens, and this puts that in motion. Is that going to be a good idea or not? Maybe they want information about housing. They come in and have literally, just left the house, have nowhere to go. So they'd be connected with Live Safe resources. So the idea is to maximize the service provider's expertise. So we don't try and do what our partner does in their expertise, but coming together and offering that all to the client. And the goal is always that the client is given information and education so that they can make a decision. So the service providers will be all there. If there's, an issue that maybe needs another type of service provider, we partner with Tapestry. So they serve immigrant victims. They can be called in if they're not there and reach out. So it's that holistic approach to meeting a client with what needs they may present. We're proud of the collaboration we have in our systems response. You'll get to know more of what we each do rather than staying in these silos.
I just think it's important for people to know like the frequency that it happens so often, and it really doesn't discriminate. I had a case with two doctors. We have lawyers, clergymen, and women. So there's no one set DV victim. And I just think we need to talk more about this occurrence so that we can essentially shift the conversation to asking the question as to why an individual engages in this type of behavior, why an individual needs to exercise power and control, as opposed to asking the question, why did she stay? And there just generally has, I think, as the years go on, there is more conversation. I think recently there's this concept of like love bombing, right? And this recognition that this initial kind of adoration and all of that's something that we see in the cycle, right? Trying to wrap someone in initially to then, once someone is dependent and emotionally involved, they then can exercise the power and control. I think we need to continue to have these types of conversations so that we can raise awareness about the frequency. I just brought up love bombing because that's something that like really has always stuck with me since it came out. And I think it's just great that we recognize that pattern. I understand that culturally it's probably not recognized within the context of domestic violence as much as it should be, but regardless, the fact that we're talking about it is progress. So if we can just raise awareness to shift the conversation to the perpetrator, that will decrease the amount of shame, but it also will then help us focus on in avoiding that behavior in the first place. So holding people accountable, and so that we don't have to kind of continue the cycle that has gone on for years and generations.
I of course agree with everything Joe said. And as you're mentioning, red flags, educating youth and teens, and not like we have to talk about these things rather than saying we can't. Educating youth and teens on red flags, and then also what are healthy relationships, so that if a child isn't getting that at home, somewhere else, they are getting that information to break the cycle and not repeat it in their own relationships as they get older and in teen relationships. Joe summarized it so well with shifting the conversation on, we constantly ask, why doesn't she just leave? That is always the conversation. The conversation is, why doesn't she just leave? And blaming and analyzing the victim's behavior. Why did she do that when this happened? Why didn't she do this? That whole conversation, and just accepting that it is complicated. Victims don't leave for a variety of reasons. It's not a cookie cutter thing. We've gone through a lot of them today, whether it's practical, like finances, living in a metro area with really high rent. To be able to afford your own rent and a living wage is really hard, right? And you've got 2 kids to feed. So getting the conversation away from it, just accepting it's complicated. We wouldn't have the need for protective orders or an advocacy center if it wasn't complex, and focusing on, why does this behavior continue? Why is this person doing this? And what as a community can we do and provide so that there are options and choices for someone trying to leave the situation?
Domestic violence is different than other issues. And I'm only talking because the Family Advocacy Center is going to serve any victims of crime. But I'm specifically talking in the context of DV. I'm obviously partial, given that this is the work that I'm doing. But in my opinion, there's no other instance in which this network and collaboration and support would be more beneficial than in the context of domestic violence.